Hello and welcome to the Chess on Toast Game of the Day. My name's Nick Murphy, with me as always, International Master Lorin D'Costa. So Lorin, before we get started, I think we should just mention we've got some new DVDs out, all available via www.chessontoast.com. We've got 3 brand new DVDs, we now have 6 DVDs in total. Our new DVDs include one on the Bishop b5 Sicilian, we've got one on the Milner-Barry Gambit, and of course we've got one on the Evans Gambit. That's right, isn't it?
That's right, Nick, yeah.
Okay, so check, if you want to buy those DVDs or see some more information, check out www.chessontoast.com. Okay, Lorin, so we're here with Game of the Day. What game are you going to show us today?
Well, we're looking at the Norway tournament going on right now, this super tournament, and we've reached the 5th round, haven't we, as of yesterday?
Yeah.
And there was a big change in the shift of power, I believe, because Sergei Karjakin, the Russian grandmaster now, I should say, had been sort of cutting his way through the field with a huge sort of, I don't know, what cuts through fields?
But he'd done it very well, hadn't he?
He'd done, well, 4 out of 4, and it's a stunning, I mean, I can't even get that in the local rapid play tournament, so that's...
I mean, at this level, when you've got players like Carlsen and Anand and stuff in the tournament, to have 4 out of the first, score 4 points out of the first 4 rounds is almost sort of unheard of, isn't it?
It is. So if it was up to Magnus Carlsen to try and take him out, and that is exactly what he's done. So Carlsen starting with 4 draws, so he was actually 2 whole points behind Karjakin. So it was quite a must-win game for Carlsen, and because he was black here, even more so, because normally you don't tend to win with black, especially against someone like Karjakin who's on such good form.
Yeah, Carlsen obviously is from Norway, isn't he? So this tournament's going on in his home turf.
That's right, but then there's a lot of pressure on him to actually do well, isn't there?
Yeah, of course.
So, but he obviously rises to the challenge. That's the start, the mark of a great player.
So this is Karjakin as white playing Carlsen as black.
That's right. And the game followed the Roy Lopez, which is something that we've looked at before, Nick, isn't it?
We have mentioned that in some other Game of the Day videos, yeah.
So instead of putting the bishop on c4, which attacks down towards f7, and that's the subject of many of our DVDs, isn't it, Nick?
Yeah, we talk about that a lot.
Here white plays a sort of more positional opening with bishop b5, so not trying to checkmate black on the f7 square, but instead we've talked many times about how the knight defends the pawn on e5, which is being attacked by this one.
So this was the Roy Lopez, or the Spanish, you can call it either, can't you?
That's right.
Yeah.
a6, so that's the normal reply.
Yeah.
Immediately questioning the bishop, so of course Karjakin played bishop a4. Well, we've looked again at bishop takes c6, so just going to quickly show that trick again in case you haven't seen any of our previous videos. The point is that white cannot win the pawn because queen d4 attacks both the knight and the pawn, and therefore wins the pawn back. That's a fork or a double attack. That's something that black needs to know. Of course, white doesn't have to capture the pawn, but can instead castle. Now here we're actually threatening to take that pawn, but black has got lots of moves like bishop d6 and so on, and this is a completely different style of game. So going back to the position after bishop a4, and both sides develop like this. So white, of course, black could go bishop c5 here, but the point of the Roy Lopez or the Spanish is that white isn't going to go knight to c3, but is in fact going to play pawn c3. So why do you think white wants to do that?
Because then possibly wants to play pawn to d4 later on, building up a strong centre. That's
right. And the problem with the bishop on c5 is that the pawn here would actually attack the bishop. So black needs to be really careful about that. Of course, this is an opening. Black can go b5, bishop b3, bishop c5. And if I just play some moves like this, what do you think is going on in this position?
Well, it looks fairly good for both sides, really, although white's got probably the stronger centre, but it looks fairly reasonable. Both sides have developed their pieces. Black has yet to castle, so that's probably the next thing that black would want to do, but yeah, it looks okay for both sides.
Yep,
really. This
is one of the main openings called the Archangelisk variation, and that wasn't played, but this is an example with what we call an active defence, Nick, where the black bishop, instead of going to e7 as we see in the game, goes to b6 over there, all the way over there where it is now, and the bishop tries to exert pressure down towards this diagonal. Whereas if the bishop sits on e7, what you find is that white doesn't like to play bishop g5 because there isn't really a decent pin on that diagonal, is there? So you're going to see that in the main line, which is what's the bishop e7 line, here we see this.
So this is what was played in the game.
This is what was played. White isn't really well, doesn't tend to go bishop g5 in these variations because that bishop is on e7 and it blocks anything happening down on the queen.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So there's really no point putting your bishop on g5.
Well, it's okay.
It's okay, but it's not threatening as much as it would be if that bishop was somewhere else. If
That's
the bishop
right.
on e7
That's
was
right.
somewhere else.
So what we say is in any opening, you need to be flexible. You mustn't play the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
You need to see what has my opponent done and how am I going to react accordingly. So here we see white doing just that. Now I should just go back a little bit after bishop e7, rook e1. Of course we said that white will defend the pawn with the rook or with anything else, but not with the knight.
Yeah.
Because of the c3 d4 idea. This is the hallmark of the Ruy Lopez or the Spanish. And there's a reason why Carlsen didn't castle now. Why is that?
Because I suppose you could take the knight on c6 and then capture the pawn, maybe?
Yeah, I think that now the queen d4 move doesn't work. Because although it attacks two pieces at once...
You could move the knight away and that pawn's...
Which way can black...
yes. The black would only be able to capture with the knight, but actually the queen's being attacked, so he can't. So he needs to move the queen out of the way.
Excellent, yeah. The queen cannot capture the pawn there in red on e4 because the rook is defending it. So although black has the knight on that square, unfortunately he can't take it with the knight, can he? Because the queen will be attacked. So this is something that, you know, for black players or white players looking to play the Spanish, these are the little tricks in the opening you need to be aware of. So Carlsen, of course, never going to fall for that, and black played b5. So that reduces the pressure, doesn't it, on the knight, bishop b3. And now black played d6. Now this is the kind of the key branch of the Ruy Lopez. If black now castles, which is the favourite of many players, if white now plays c3, threatening the move d4, black now has the opportunity to do the Marshall Gambit with d5. Have you ever seen that before?
I think you've mentioned it in one of our videos. I seem to remember the name, but I can't think when it was. Certainly, you've talked about the Marshall Gambit before.
I have to say, we've done quite a few videos here with Chess on Toast, covering a lot of these sort of big tournaments going on in the past few months. And I can't remember exactly which one, but I definitely remember that we have covered this. And the point is that black sacrifices this e pawn like this, in order to sort of prove that now black has some attacking idea with bishop here and queen h4. And that's very powerful because white hasn't really got any protection, has he? He's lost his knight on f3, and that's going to be quite good. So for example, if I just show two more moves, rook has to move, queen h4, and bang, zoom, right down here. So this is all the main line of the Marshall Gambit, and we haven't got time for that here, but that's something to be aware of. So Carlsen, by playing d6, actually this move has got a little bit more poison than it looks, because the pawn, instead of going to d5, tries to defend its pawn on e5. So black has actually got a mini threat here, which is knight to a5. Why do you think black would want to do that?
Well, it's putting the knight on the rim, which we normally say is a bad idea, but it looks like the reason you would do that is because the bishop doesn't have anywhere to go to.
That's right.
So
Why do you think black wants to swap the knight for the bishop?
Well, that bishop, white's bishop on b3, looks like one of white's best pieces at the moment. A lot of the other pieces haven't even been developed. And it's that bishop's cutting right across onto that weak f7 square. So it looks like you're swapping off a sort of okay knight for a very good bishop.
That's right. This was Bobby Fischer's favourite bishop back in the 60s and 70s. He's the one who coined this sort of Ruy Lopez bishop, the Spanish bishop. So white does not want to allow black to go knight a5. And I have actually fallen for this before. I remember once when I was 11 years old and I went h3 here.
Yeah.
My opponent played knight a5 and I realised, I've allowed him to swap off my bishop, and I ended up losing.
Yeah.
So Karjakin knows his theory, and he realised that he must go c3 straight away, because if knight a5...
Now you can just put the bishop onto c2.
That's right. So the bishop, although it looks like it's on a worse diagonal, as we see at some point, white's going to go d4.
You're going to go d4 if those pieces in the centre move out, the pawns in the centre move out of the way, and the black king castles, then that h7 pawn could become a target in the future.
That's right, and the bishop's just going to be powerful at some moment.
Yeah.
So after c3, castles. Now white could of course go d4, which is one of the main lines, but this allows black to play bishop g4. And white's got a little bit of pressure on here because the knight is required, isn't it, to defend the pawn there. And
it's not actually because it's pinned to the queen. It can't actually defend the pawn.
That's right, it's pinned, so white has to do... Well, white's real best move is to go bishop e3. And this is kind of a side note because none of this happened. But this is one of the main lines. Why do you think black can now not take that pawn on e4? There's a little trick, a tactical trick. For
it does look like there's some sort of discovered attack by... Oh, you pointed
using
at the other bishop.
Using our... I thought since we talked about the Spanish Roy Lopez bishop, we should probably get him involved.
Okay, well now you've given me a helpful hint by highlighting the bishop on b3, because we're going to talk about the other bishop. So I would say if you move that bishop on b3 onto d5, you're then forking the two knights.
Excellent, and that's the drawback of playing b5, that the pawn isn't now protecting, is it? So...
No.
That's another little trick in the Roy Lopez or the Spanish to remember. In this position, black cannot take because of there. However, what do I think black's best idea is? I think it's take, knight a5, bishop c2. Of course, we talked about that move, didn't we?
Yes, yeah.
Knight c4, and then black can counterattack in the centre. This is a completely different variation. But it is sort of similar to what happens in the game, where black ends up going, or tries to go c5. Which Carlsen does in the game, this pawn move here, attacking the centre. And it's a kind of a strategical idea for black to be playing. So let's have a look back at the game, see what happened. h3, so here we talked about preventing bishop g4.
Yeah.
Now there are so many moves here for black, I couldn't possibly try to describe them all. But the move played by Carlsen is knight b8. Now why do you think he's done that?
Wow, I mean...
That's not the first move you'd guess, right?
No, I mean, I think I could probably guess at least 5 moves before I'd even contemplate that. I mean, it just looks...
Go on, suggest 5 moves then.
Oh, no.
Okay, suggest 3.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to bring that bishop there on c8 to b7.
Right, that's called the Smyslov variation, one of the main ones. Good.
Okay, I would say maybe... what else could you do? Oh, let me think.
What's the knight move black's been playing?
Well, yeah, I guess knight a5 is a possibility here.
And when the bishop moves, you go c5. That's the Chigorin variation.
Yeah. And maybe even just bring the rook onto e8 or something like that.
Yeah, rook e8. Well, that will kind of transpose after bishop b7. Yeah. So you've come out with all these good moves, sensible developing moves. But after h3, he went knight b8. Now, the reason why he went there is very similar to the Chigorin variation we just looked at. Black wants to go c5. So what he's going to do is he's going to put the bishop on b7 like you did, but he's going to put the knight on d7 and then play c5. So watch what happens over the coming moves.
It's funny, just from my point of view, because we talk so much about developing your pieces, and here we've got the highest rated player in the world undeveloping one of his pieces. But, and so we do say that sometimes those rules can be broken, but you really have to know what you're doing to break one of the rules that we talked about.
That's right. I'd say that the key thing was that this position is quite closed at the moment. Right. If in an open position where a lot of pieces have been exchanged, or the centre pawns, the centre squares had all been exchanged off, then it's a cardinal sin to do that. But here, is the position that open, really?
No, it's very sort of close.
No, they've developed, but they've kind of like fighting behind their own lines. So at the moment, it's not really that exciting, so which means that black has time to do these moves, and suddenly out of nowhere black's position looks quite harmonious, I'd say. Bishop c2. Now there's a kind of a key idea about this knight here. It's blocking in our bishop, isn't it? So what white wants to do is this maneuver, knight f1 to g3, and that's the Spanish maneuver, which defends the pawn on e4, and the knight has possibility to come to these attacking squares in the future. The problem with knight f1 is that it allows black to take the pawn.
Right.
So that explains Karjakin's next move, which was bishop c2. So both sides develop. Just to say that here, the main line is actually to go knight f1, bishop f8, knight g3. Don't you think that if you look at black's moves, if you've never seen this before, black's put his knight back on b8 and his bishop back on f8. It's just like he's trying to start again. But it's all part of the idea for black to unleash the rook, unleash the c-pawn. So all actually.
If I didn't know who was playing this, I'd be saying, God, he doesn't look like he's a very good player. He keeps putting his pieces back on the starting square.
But unfortunately, since we do know it's Carlsen, I think we'll let him off.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Now both sides actually sort of complete their development, and the position doesn't really appear to be too exciting. I mean, both sides kind of develop their pieces, but they're not really kind of appearing to do a lot, are they?
No.
I could have commented on all those moves, but really what's happening is they're both kind of playing a bit of cat and mouse. And now Karjakin, probably with his confidence tails up, isn't it, at the moment? He decided, right, well, I'm going to be the first one to do a pawn break. And we've talked about pawn breaks before. What is it I've mentioned?
Pawn breaks. Usually,
were you listening?
Usually you say pawn... I mean, that's really where the sort of imbalance comes in a game, isn't it? It's like if you've got all your pieces out and you've developed and everything, then you do a pawn break to try and create weaknesses and things like that.
Well, really, it's like, yes, I suppose you can say it creates weaknesses, but what it does is it opens up the lines for all our big pieces, because at the moment they're kind of stuck behind enemy lines. This rook is on an open file, but apart from that, none of the other files are open. So c4 tries to open up the long diagonal and tries to open that one as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So a pawn break is when you play a move to try and exchange pawns off and open lines for your big pieces.
Yeah.
So that's why. And after an exchange, I gotta say that I quite like White's position here. I mean, Black's solid, but it's very hard to imagine that Black wins quite soon. H6 is a sensible move, which prevents the sort of fried liver knight knight g5, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Attacking on f7. But I still can't really believe, especially after White took here, that Black's really better here. I mean, it'd be interesting to know what Carlsen was thinking at the moment, because he knows he has to win, and he's a very patient guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
But even he can't have really imagined that he was actually going to end up winning this, because whilst the pawn is being attacked on b4 by the bishop c3, it's still quite. I still prefer White, really. I think it's maybe check with the computer, but I think White really can't. Karjakin cannot complain here, and he's got this idea of queen b2 to attack down towards the pawn in e5, and we're going to see this happen in the game. This is the key part of the game here. So c5. Now White could have just captured that and just agreed to draw probably, but you know what? Karjakin is a brave guy, isn't he? He's a young guy. He's quite. He's on 4 out of 4, and he probably thought,
he must feel pretty confident.
Yeah, and he probably thought, I could have Carlsen here. I could really take him on. I could not exchange that and not just play for a draw with White. What happens if I try and go for him? He went queen b2. Now this allowed Black the idea of this passed pawn, but after bishop a4, now it starts to get really tactical, because the rook is being attacked, and White has 3 pieces on this pawn, doesn't he? He has the queen, bishop, and the knight, whereas Black only has 2 pieces defending it. So after rook e6, he actually picked up a pawn. So, having said that, we thought White could easily go for a draw. Now it looks like he's actually almost winning, isn't he?
Yeah.
Bishop b7, attacking the bishop and the pawn, but Karjakin had it all worked out. Bishop c2, defending and protecting. So, again, it all looks like everything was good after rook e8. Do you think Black's threatening to take?
Well, he's attacking with 3 pieces, and that it looks like it's only defended with 2.
So we should probably try and defend that again.
I guess we should try and defend that again. Maybe bring the pawn from f up to f4.
Well, that's the only way he can do it. I think if he moves the knight, Black could go knight takes e4. But now I actually prefer Black, probably, because the knight starts to actually. I mean, it's still okay, but I think. Just wondering if there's a tactic here for
Black has those powerful doubled rooks.
Maybe I can go bishop e5 here. Just wondering if that's a tactic. Sorry, this is just me on my flights of fantasy here. But I'm just wondering if we could use this pin now to go f3. Probably doesn't work. Bishop takes b4. Ooh, it's all looking a bit hairy. I don't really know. Maybe rook d8 check, king here, bishop check. Well, I've just sort of made up a variation there, which looks good for White. So I'm wondering after knight f3, maybe Black should just play bishop takes e4 and it's okay for him. But anyway, Karjakin obviously wanted more. He went f4, and this is the critical moment of the game, because after bishop d6, White is, well, he's a pawn up, he's got all these pieces in the centre, but suddenly it all starts to fall apart. Now the key pawn is that guy there.
Yeah.
So if we can get rid of him, we can sort of undermine this knight. And Black has a lot of pressure down towards e4. So Black's main idea is to go knight h5. So I'm just wondering maybe if Karjakin missed something. I don't know, what could he do? Maybe bishop b1 to meet knight h5 with queen f2 or something.
Right.
But I still think that after f6, Black has so much pressure down here that White's position could actually collapse, and you're going to see that in the game, because after king h2, I don't really like putting my king on the same line as these major pieces, by the way.
I mean...
Which is what happens in the game, because knight h5, g3, f6. And I think after knight here, Karjakin just thought, well, there's no problem. I mean, whilst my king looks a little bit dodgy around here, I've got everything covered, but look what happened now. Knight takes f4.
Ah, yeah.
And this was the key moment of the game, because maybe Karjakin underestimated it, or he didn't really analyse it enough. It's hard to say. But after this blow, it's amazing how White's position just crumbles. If we take... We actually swap there. But if we take on f4, I believe that best is takes on f4 check. And now, with this queen hanging around, I'd really want to get my rooks into the game. So how do you think we're going to get the rook in on that direction?
Well, I'd say then we have to bring that pawn down to f5.
And now we see the bishop come into the game.
So
although white's a whole bishop ahead, I think that rook g6 is just going to be a massive threat in this position. I'm really struggling to see a move for white, because after something like rook f1, check on g6, king has to go in the corner, and maybe we've got something like queen g3 threatening all sorts of mates here, and queen on g2 checkmate. Maybe black's threatening to play rook takes e4 and trying to do a threat checkmate with the bishop. I think this is dead for white. So suddenly out of nowhere, after knight takes f4, what a tactic. So rook takes d6.
Yeah, it's one of those real good instances of, even though it looks like the pawn is defended, it's worthwhile, taking a few moments and seeing whether you can actually take it.
Exactly, yeah, some of the tactics,
At first glance, it looks like you couldn't do that move.
That's right, and a strong chess player will notice that, he'll grab that one chance he has, like Carlsen. He's seen the only way I'm going to do something here, I'm a pawn down, and I'm just going to take on f4. So rook takes d6, and that was played because that bishop was proving to be a complete menace down here, wasn't it?
Yes.
So if black just takes back, this hands white the advantage again because of knight takes f4, and we can't capture him there, can we?
No.
But of course Carlsen had seen all that, and he didn't take the rook, instead calmly played knight takes g6. So after the exchange, we see that black has actually recovered the pawn. So you'd think, well, Karjakin has a pawn up, but now he's lost the pawn back, is still equal. But psychologically, I think this is a bit of a damaging blow, because the white king is much weaker than the black king, isn't it?
Yeah.
And king safety is of paramount importance in any position, especially when your opponent's got queens on the board. And I think that this is the kind of deciding factor in this game, the fact that the black king is just safer than the white king.
Yeah.
And we're going to see that in the end. f5, there's that move again with the pin, and now the bishop on b7, which was good but not amazingly good.
It didn't really seem like it was that involved in the
yeah,
game.
now it's starting to look like a very good piece. So e5. I still think that Karjakin thought everything was okay here. Look, he's got the bishop on here, but now we see another outstanding move. Knight takes e5. Now, Carlsen as black, he knows what to do, what we call the count, which is count how many pieces you have defending it.
Defended by 2 pieces, being attacked
by 3. So that looks just ridiculous. But after
like
he took queen c6, that battery is going to be really dangerous. And after bishop takes e5, f5, I think. Let me just have a quick check in case I've made a mistake here. Black can play rook takes e5. And notice that the white queen needs to protect that square.
There's 2 possible checkmating squares, aren't there?
Whichever way white captures that. Look, he's going to end up getting checkmated on one of those.
If you capture with the rook, you're going to get checkmated on h1, but if you capture with the queen, you get checkmated on g2.
Yeah, brilliant calculation from Carlsen. So after, in this position, queen c6, if white, did bishop takes f5, which he went rook g1 there, rook takes e5, what a brilliant move. And now, even here, white's completely lost, because after this, look, we can even sacrifice the rook again for kamikaze.
She still can't move that rook off the back of,
Didn't we talk about king safety just a moment ago? Really, really important. Never, ever weaken your king like that if you can. So after queen c6, rook g1, queen d5. Brilliant play again, because if the bishop moves, what does black do next to win?
You could just bring the rook down to e2.
Rook e2 check, and that king again, very poor piece. So in the game you played, bishop takes f5, and black won the piece back. Well, again, it's equal material, but king safety is going to be a big problem for white here. And the game, unsurprisingly, finished after a few moves. Look how white's been... That Roy Lopez bishop we talked about, it was supposed to be our fantastic piece, but actually it's been forced back to d1. Pawn to c3. So why did he do that? Alright, queen takes c3. There is, I think it's queen a2 check, looks pretty handy. So after queen c2, again, look, the king can't go anywhere, can it?
Oh, you could, no, the king's stuck there, and also, if you did queen c2, could you then bring the rook down to e2?
Oops. Well, I think you can't go rook e2 yet, because of queen takes e2.
Of course, yeah, sorry.
But I think I'm winning. But I think after queen takes c2, bishop takes...
Now you do.
But not only does white have to go rook g2, we lose everything. Look, we lose both the pieces.
Okay,
and it's game over.
Even I could win that.
What, against Karjakin?
even against Karjakin.
So queen f2, rook f5, black keeps attacking, And Queen f7, what's the idea behind that move?
Now you can put the rook on f2.
Good, rook f2 is threatened. What, you can't even stop that. Look, you can't even go rook g2 because the bishop's on it.
That bishop has really become a thorn in white's side.
That's right. So g4 to create a space for the king if black goes rook f2 check. Rook e5, that's a lovely move because if we go here, queen f2 check, and it's going to be checkmate on the next move, isn't it?
Yeah.
So rook e5, queen d4, and again, perfect to the end, queen c7, an excellent move. And look how dangerous these pieces have been. The black bishop shoots across to h1, the black queen shoots across down here, and there's very little that white can do about it.
Needs to say, I mean, white's just never really had an attack on the black king.
No.
You know, it's all, as you were talking about the king's safety, even though, you know, the black king's just sort of been over there the whole time.
That's
White's
right.
never been able to build up an attack on it.
So that was expert play from Carlsen, but I still think in the middle game, you know, if we check with the computers, there might have been something there for Karjakin as white. He won that pawn, didn't he, on e5?
Yeah.
And it looked like everything was just going quite well for him. So, you know, outstanding play from Carlsen, but possibly there was a missed chance. And I think if Karjakin had won this, he would have been on 5 out of 5. And I think he might end up regretting it. I think he's still got a big lead, but that's quite a sort of psychological damaging loss for him there, because I think he's going to feel that he really had some chances in that game. So there you go, Carlsen back in it, and all to play for the coming rounds, isn't it, Nick?
Just shows that you cannot underestimate Magnus Carlsen,
No,
the
you
world's
can't.
number one.
No, absolutely not.
Well, thank you very much for that, Lorin. That was a fantastic game and a rather brilliant win by Magnus Carlsen. That's it from Chess on Toast Game of the Day for today. As I say, just point out that we do have some DVDs available. Check them out, www.chessontoast.com. But from us for now, we'll see you in the next video. Cheerio, bye-bye.